What up? What up? What up? Welcome to the Bleacher Report app, where it's unfortunately time to start digging our heels in on everything off-season related for the Boston Celtics. My name is Will Weir. I'm one of the hosts of the Green with Envy podcast. You can find us wherever you stream podcasts and across YouTube, Instagram, at Green Envy Pod. Make sure that y'all are following along with us. Today's topic: off-season trade ideas. Cue up the trade machine, dust it off. It's time for us to dig in. So as everyone's joining us here in the chat, make sure you are dropping your own trades into the chat here. Myself and my co-host, I'm going to introduce here in just a second. We've got a couple constructions that we've put together. We want to get your thoughts on. So as we go through these, please let us know whether this sounds great, whether we're idiots, whether you can tweak it, make it better. Let us know, and we'll make sure that we get y'all involved. But we're excited to be here. So to help me break it all down, I have got my partners in crime here from Green with Envy. So first up, we have my best friend, co-host, and the coach of the podcast, Mr. Greg Manakis. How are you doing today, homie?
Well, we're definitely idiots. So if people got to let us know that we're idiots. We're definitely idiots, so you won't be offending us. Just let us know what you think. I'm feeling great, man. Feeling great. I was not looking forward to talking about the Celtics trade options this offseason. I thought we were going to win the championship, but now that we're here, I'm ready.
Yeah, we're here a little too early, but it's okay. You know what? We move forward, and to help us do that, again, we have our other member of the Green with Envy podcast team, which together we create what is known as the three-man weave. And this is our podcasting cousin from across the pond and the leader of the Taylor gang, the one and only Adam Taylor. What's poppin', Adam?
Yo, what's good, man? What's good? Didn't really want to be here this soon while the NBA finals are still going on, but happy to be here. Got some trades we need to discuss. Some of them are going to really upset people. I think that some of them make a lot of sense.
Well, the chat's already popping here. I can see we've got some JB for Dame comments out there. We've got some split opinions on what to do with the Jays. So let's get this started with some of the trades that we came up with. And the first one I came up, we're going to dip our toe. We're going to get spicy, but we're not going to get too crazy quite yet. You know, Brad Stevens just had his kind of exit press conference yesterday, talked about the core and keep them together. Well, first trade I got, we're going to break up that core a little bit here. We're going to change that up a little bit. It feels like the Celtics need a little bit of a change. So the first trade that I'm going to propose, and this is my trade that I came up with, it's going to be between the Celtics and the Memphis Grizzlies. We're going to send out Marcus Smart. Sorry, Marcus, love and trust. And in return, we're going to get back Tyus Jones and Santi Aldama, plus maybe a pick. We probably got to figure out a pick in there somewhere to make that even. But that is the bones of this trade. And the reason that I think this trade makes sense, love Marcus, but we've talked about for years as a Celtic fan base, we need a table-setting point guard. Well, as the current NBA works, there's not a lot out there. You've got Mike Conley, Chris Paul. They're old and expensive. You've got Darius Garland, Jaylen Brunson. Too good, not available. Just there isn't a way to get those guys. They're awesome. So that leaves not much left in that kind of middle ground. And I think Tyus Jones might fit that bill. So, Greg, let's start with you. What do you think? Marcus Smart for Tyus Jones, Santi Aldama, and probably a pick.
Okay, it would be tough to lose Marcus Smart, but I think that we've seen what this core can do, right? We can make it to Eastern Conference Finals. We made it to one NBA championship. Smart has been good in moments. He's been bad in moments. But the one thing that we've seen from this team is their inability to take care of the ball. And if you want a point guard who's going to take care of the ball, you go to Tyus Jones. Tyus Jones has the best assist-to-turnover ratio in the league. Whenever the Grizzlies lose Ja Morant, for whatever reason, they're currently losing Ja Morant of the week, Tyus Jones comes in, fills in admirably. The Grizzlies don't really miss a beat when Tyus Jones is on the court instead of Ja Morant. So if people are like, oh, like maybe Marcus Smart's defense, whatever, we can get by without Marcus Smart's defense. What we need, as you said, is a table-setting point guard who doesn't turn the ball over, who can set guys up. Adam, you've been talking about Jaylen Brown needing to be a play finisher all year. This would remove all ball handling duties from JB. It would be a lot of Tyus Jones. It'd be a lot of Jason Tatum. Santi Aldama's got some size, can shoot the three ball. I like this trade. Tyus Jones is someone I've had my eye on for quite some time. So although it would hurt to lose Marcus, I love Marcus. I'm in on this trade. And Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Tyus Jones is one of the best non-star guards in the league. You know, he's not at the level of of your Dames, of your Jars, and guys like that. But he's definitely one of the best playmaking guards that isn't a superstar. I think that this makes sense for Memphis too. Moving on from Dylan Brooks, they need that agitator. Bringing in Marcus Smart kind of fills that role for them, gives them that kind of grit that they need. Look, Smart's aging now. What is he heading into his age 31, age 30 season? Like, his defense wasn't where it was this season to where it was last year. Obviously, the team as a whole still finished second in defensive rating, but they weren't the defensive juggernaut that we saw from the year before. I'm okay on Salty Aldama. Like, to me, that's more of a throw-in. I feel like the actual bones of the deal is more just Marcus Smart for Tyus Jones. Everybody wants that playmaker, and when you think of the CBA restrictions that are going to come in with the second tax apron and stuff, you have to be willing to kind of accept it's not going to be a Dame type of guy. Like, the whole reason people were talking about moving on from Jaylen was to get under that second tax apron, and Dame's going to earn more. It's just a redundant trade in that respect. So Tyus Jones for me makes plenty of sense.
Yeah, well, looking at the chat right now, I would say it's a pretty heavy negative approval rating on this trade right now. We've got a few sprinkled in there that are giving it some love, but overall, definitely not necessarily feeling this trade. Got a few people here that say need more back. Marcus fires the starting lineup up. So, and I see all these things, like I said, this is a trade that's going to hurt. If you do move off of Marcus, he is definitively one of the heart and souls of this team. I mean, I think there's a world in which, if this is Brogdon, I wonder if this is a higher, approval rating. And that certainly would be something that would be open in my mind as well. Insert Brogdon versus Marcus Smart in this trade, depending on, what Memphis is looking for. And obviously they have a very interesting situation with their guard rotation right now, to say the least, based off Adam Silver's comments last night. But aside from this trade, I know I saw several people talking about Andrew Wiggins in the chat right now. So that is going to be a perfect segue for us to actually move on to our second trade here. And Greg, this one came from you here. So I'm going to lay it out, that I want you to kind of dig in and explain it to us here. But in this trade, the Celtics, this is a big one. We're getting spicy here. So get ready. You're either going to love this one, or you're going to have some visceral feelings about it. This one sends out Jaylen Brown to the Golden State Warriors. And in return, we get Andrew Wiggins, Jonathan Kuminga, and a 2025 first-round pick. The picks, I'm sure, can be kind of decided upon at a later date. But, Greg, give us your defense.
I mean, my initial reaction to that, hearing that out loud, I really don't want to lose Jaylen Brown. This is more to Adam's point earlier about the second apron of the tax, right? If you're really concerned about that, Wiggins is, I think he has 2 more years on his contract after this year, and it's at around $30 million a year. And he's going to give you about 85 to 90% of what Jaylen Brown can give you on the offensive end. He's not as good of a shooter. He's got a little bit more size, but he is a better defender, right? And if what we saw Andrew Wiggins do against Jason Tatum in the finals last year, we saw what he did against Luka Doncic in the playoffs last year. He is one of those guys that can make a big impact on the defensive end. I've always liked Wiggins. He doesn't have the dog in him that Jaylen Brown does, but like when you start getting into those cliched phrases, like, is that really even a real thing? Like, to have the dog in you, like Jaylen Brown definitely has stepped up. He played through the facial fracture. He played through the hand injury. I love Jaylen Brown. He's literally my favorite player on the Celtics. But if you are going to move on from Jaylen Brown for tax reasons, I think this is a pretty good trade, because you get Wiggins, who's under control, does a lot of what Jaylen Brown can do. And then you also get Kuminga, who the Warriors seem to be down on. There might be some, I'm not reading the chat right now. My brain wouldn't be able to handle it. I'm wondering what people are saying, but with Kuminga, he's one of those guys where you might be able to develop a little bit more value from the guy who has lost some value throughout the year. The Warriors just don't play him. They haven't trusted him. Maybe that's a young wing you can develop. Maybe that's someone you can flip for another asset, pair him with somebody else and flip in a trade. And then the 25 or 26 first, I actually don't know which picks are available for the Warriors. I think it's either 25 or 26 that's available. Wouldn't be a good pick, but it's still a first round pick. So those are my thoughts on it. As I said, I'm not a pro trade JB guy, but if you're going to trade him because of the tax situation, this is an idea that I had. And you guys let me know. Are people like bringing out the pitchforks right now in the chat?
We've got a little bit of a mixed response right now. I feel like there's some people that are vibing with the idea of Wiggins. Others are saying, hell no, that kind of feels like you're planting your flag on just not trading Jaylen Brown. My thoughts on this, are Andrew Wiggins is kind of even though he's better on defense than Jaylen Brown, this is going to be a lesser version of a similar type player to Jaylen Brown overall is kind of what we're looking at. And then you're betting on that upside with Kuminga, which, like you said, the Warriors seem to be down on. My biggest worry is that, for the CBA reasons, I think we should supermax Jaylen. We'll figure it out in 2 years. There's 2 years to kind of resort the roster before it really, really gets scary. So you have a little bit of time if you end up doing the supermax. My biggest worry is that, yes, Kuminga has upside, but is this not if it's going to turn into potentially an Aaron Nesmith type situation, in the sense that he needs room to play and make mistakes? And the Celtics, now if you're replacing Wiggins, he's going to get a lot of those Jaylen Brown minutes. Where's he going to get that room to develop and still compete at a high level? So that, for me, negates a little bit of the value of Jonathan Kuminga, and I think makes this trade a little bit harder to swallow. But Adam, where are you at on this?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I see a lot of people saying that the value coming back isn't fair for Jaylen, and that's completely a fair response. Like, it's very hard to trade somebody like Jaylen that's had a breakout year, but is also coming into the final year of a contract that's contract extension eligible, whether that be Supermax or Max, or how, like, obviously if he gets traded, it's going to be a max contract, not a Supermax. But then teams are taking a chance on that trade because they need to feel confident that Jaylen Brown's going to re-sign wherever he gets moved to. So you take a little bit of a hit on value there. Obviously, you can try and get something done once they get to their new team. I like Andrew Wiggins. Maple Jordan's had a good career in Golden State. Didn't really start off very well for him. He definitely improves the wing defense. He's a wing stopper. It kind of removes the questions around who's the number one guy. Some people want Brown to be more the number one rather than Tatum. I'm sorry, but Tatum's clearly the more skilled. I think that for me, I'll probably consider this trade, but you bring in 2 players back that play similar positions. As you said, it's finding minutes for Kuminga to get developmental time. We saw that Joe likes to run a rigid rotation. I don't know whether Kuminga actually gets that opportunity, or you try and move him in a different trade further down the line, maybe him plus some future picks, or maybe a Peyton Pritchard plus Kuminga in a secondary deal. Maybe you bring a third team in. I like the idea, and you're never going to get value back for Jaylen at what you want because there's just so many factors at play there. So I'm not sure I'd do it, but it'd be one that I'd at least sit down and think about, probably try and work out how the rotations would look, how he accentuates everybody. So I'm kind of on the fence. I'm probably 60% no, 40% yes.
Yeah, and just real quick for everybody in the chat, because I was able to read some of the stuff. Once again, I am not advocating for Jaylen Brown. I'm saying if the Celtics make the decision that they need to move on from Jaylen Brown for tax implications, this is just an idea I'm throwing out there. Don't come at me. I'm just the messenger.
I feel like that's going to be a staple of our conversations all off season. I'm not advocating for this. I'm just hypothetically throwing this out there as a discussion point. That's just, we have to come up with a disclaimer before each of our podcasts that state that. One thing I do want to ask you, Greg, here, because I think you had mentioned this to me just in a text message, or maybe in one of our conversations in person. Is there a version that you would rework this and maybe insert Klay Thompson in some way? Because I am seeing a few of those in the chat here that, Klay or Draymond is someone that may be of more appeal than Wiggins. Is there a version you could see that, Klay is as of appeal, championship pedigree, sharpshooter, if we're going to live and die by the 3-ball, although it's been a little bit up and down since return from injury, but is there any, is there anything that you would think about with Klay Thompson involved?
I think in a vacuum, he's a better fit for the Celtics and what the Celtics are trying to accomplish. But when you think about Klay being on the wrong side of a couple of major injuries, the wrong side of 30, and although he had his best percentage shooting year this year, we've just seen those moments where Klay doesn't quite have the magic, right? He doesn't have the magic that he used to have. So, and also the Warriors, if they're going to give up somebody, I feel like they're not giving up the Splash Brothers. I feel like they're going to try and keep that together. Probably going to try and keep Draymond. Steve Kerr's comments at the end of the season said they wanted to keep Draymond. So when you're constructing these trades, I think one thing you're also trying to do is think about from the other team's perspective, who are the people that they're more likely to move on from. And I feel like they're more likely to move on from a Wiggins and a Kuminga than they are from the core that has brought them the dynasty that they have. But I think in a vacuum, Klay Thompson makes more sense for what the Celtics want to accomplish, but he's not a guy. He costs more money. First of all, he's like $40 million a year versus 30, which is.
Yeah, I think, Greg, you might be having some technical difficulties here. There we go. We got you back. We got you back here. So I agree with you there. So we're going to keep this moving here because I want to get Adam. Adam's got a couple of trade ideas that I actually really like that we're about to get into here. So Adam, I'm going to pivot this chat from away from the Warriors, but we're going to stick with Jaylen Brown. We got another Jaylen Brown trade here. Now, I think a lot of this, obviously, when we talk about Jaylen Brown, a lot of this is going to be if he does not sign the Supermax. I think that's because there's a year-long trade restriction. If he signs that max, that kind of takes all of this, off the board until next offseason. So having said that, the next trade that we have also involves losing Jaylen Brown, but in return, the Celtics have Wendell Carter Jr. and Franz Wagner coming from the Orlando Magic. Adam, number one, rate my German impression, and number two, tell us a little bit about this trade.
I'd give it a solid 7 out of 10. Let's just start there. I think that was very good. Can we please hear it one more time?
Franz Wagner.
Yeah, so I like this deal in terms of, I think Franz Wagner, I'm not even going to try and do that accent. I think that actually gives you long-term upside who can contribute straight away. He's clearly one of the best producers for the Magic. He's developing as a two-way guy, can do stuff on both ends of the floor. He wouldn't solve or replace Jaylen in terms of give you what his production is right away, but I think that could definitely give you some future upside. So I think it's a player option or a team option for the upcoming year. Then there's going to be an extension, but it's not going to be anywhere near the level of what Jaylen would be getting paid. So you can upgrade there and then continue to develop. And I think when you look at the new CBA and the way that works, you need to have some young guys on the roster behind your stars that you can develop. Wendell Carter Jr. to me was kind of just to throw in some insurance for Robert Williams. Al Horford's probably a year or two away. That would kind of be where I went with that. I can see the chat absolutely hates it, which means I've definitely done a good job. If everybody hates it, it's a decent idea.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. Like, I love the Orlando Magic. Like, I watched a lot of Orlando Magic games. Franz had a great year. I think he has a lot of potential. I think Carter Jr. actually fits really well with what the Celtics want to do. It's like we might be we might be late to the game as Celtics fans who don't really watch the Magic about how good Franz Wagner is. But I don't think that the Celtics are getting back the right value for Jaylen Brown. But you do have like a cost controlled guy, which I think is important when you're trying to think like a front office executive, right? You have Franz on that rookie deal. Wendell Carter, I think, has already got his extension. But they're both relatively good contracts, right? Franz has a ton of potential. I think that solves a lot of the 1 versus 2 things. I personally, like a lot of people in the chat, probably wouldn't do this deal. I wouldn't do the other deal that I pitched for Jaylen Brown. I want Jaylen Brown in Boston. But I think that this is something to consider at least. And remember, all these trades, disclaimer for everyone getting crazy in the chat, this is if the Celtics decide that they can't stomach the $60 million a year for Jaylen Brown. But I think this is a decent attempt. We're molding the clay right now. We're trying to find the right deal, and hopefully at one point we'll have at least 60% of the chat that's in on a deal.
I mean, you know what they say,
Adam,
right?
go ahead, Adam.
Sorry. I was like, you know what they say? If everybody hates the trade idea, then it's probably a good trade idea. But people from both sides have to hate it. The Magic fans have to hate it too.
So, Adam, I actually really agree with that. And as I was trying to think of some of these trades, it was, if this trade hurts me to put into the trade machine a little bit, there's probably some merit to it. You know what I mean? Like, if it just feels like, oh, this is a home run, why wouldn't we do this? It's like, oh, because probably the other side wouldn't do this at all, or they wouldn't even consider it because it's that much of a home run. So I think when we look at this deal, Franz, I think kind of fits what feels like is sometimes missing from the Jaylen Brown component as far as, ball handling, playmaking in that wing position to work with Tatum, to have more pick and roll opportunities, from both areas of the wing that can handle the ball, that can play make. And so, like Greg said, I don't know how familiar a lot of people are with Franz's game. Franz's game is nice. He's, I definitely slept on him his rookie season, watch more of him this year, and I think him and Paolo are almost, aiming to be another, giant wing tandem version of what Jaylen and Jason are right now in the Eastern Conference. Like, that's who I kind of look to in the next 2 to 3 years to say, oh man, these guys are here a little bit quicker than we thought. And so I think actually, I think there's two sides to this. One, Celtics probably want a little bit more in whether that's draft pick compensation or something that makes them feel like, okay, we're definitely still competing at a conference finalist level, NBA finals level right now. And then also the Magic would have to think about, Jaylen Brown would speed up their timeline because right now everybody's kind of in that same lane. Not to say that Jaylen Brown's too far outside of that, but with Franz and Paolo both on rookie deals, both being under that control, and Jaylen, going to take another jump. Even if he's traded, it's still going to be another jump in his level of compensation. I think that would give them some questions. So I think there's questions on both sides of this deal, but I think the player type that if we're looking to ever supplant Jaylen Brown, whether it's now or 2 years from now, or hopefully never, and hopefully Jaylen and Jason just bring us a championship in the next couple of years, and this becomes dumb looking back at it that we're having these conversations. Like, that's the plan. But I think Franz Wagner does kind of fit the player type to look at. But with that, let's go to the next trade that we have here. We got a couple minutes left here, and I see the chat has been kind of popping off with some trades as well, to try to get to those here in just a minute. But another trade that you came up with here, Adam, it involves the Phoenix Suns. And this is one that I know a different version I had kind of thrown out to you in our private chat. So I see here you've taken a spin on that as well. So in this particular trade, we have Marcus Smart and Robert Williams going out and coming back. Buy low scenario here, and the Celtics would bring back DeAndre Ayton. Adam, tell us about it.
Yeah, I just think that, Robert Williams' health issues is something that you need to be concerned about with Al getting older. Finding a long-term replacement at the 5 makes a ton of sense. I understand that you're giving up on Rob. I know that in Brad's press conference, one of the things he said was, Rob is going to be a big part of everything we do well here. But that's when he's healthy, right? And I think that if you start moving Al back to the bench and then you put Robin into the starting lineup and he gets hurt, now all of a sudden you're short. Al's another year older. Can the 3-point shooting sustain for another regular season when he's not playing back-to-backs? Can you get that? Can you get that same production out of him in the postseason again? I think DeAndre Ayton's still got some upside left in him. Hasn't really he's definitely played well for Phoenix, but I feel like he still hasn't reached anywhere near the ceiling that he flashed when he came into the league. Has the pedigree, came in as the first overall pick when he was drafted by Phoenix, and it's just a fresh start for him. And then you're moving off from an injury-prone big man that I love. I mean, we all love Rob here. That's why it was the Rob Williams kind of scenario for a while. And then you're moving off Marcus Smart to open up some rotation spots, put Derek White into the starting lineup, and so far from there.
Yeah, and that's a typo on the screen, everybody. It's DeAndre Ayton, not DeAndre Jordan, for those of you that are freaking out. It's DeAndre Ayton. We are aware that we would not trade Marcus Smart and Robert Williams for DeAndre Jordan. This is for DeAndre Ayton. And for everyone that's Team Rob, I get it. Rob's on a really great contract. We got great value for him at $10 or $11 million a year. But we saw, again, man, it's just so hard to rely on Rob. He ended up playing less than 20 minutes a game in the playoffs again. Every time he jumps, it's just holding your breath that he might come down and do the Rob Williams hobble up the court. So we're worried about that. This is if you're hoping that DeAndre Ayton coming into Boston revitalizes him, different culture, a little bit, maybe less pressure because he's not the number one pick to the franchise that drafted him over Luka. All these things, maybe there's a world in which, personally, Ayton's not a guy that I would go for. I don't think that he loves basketball. That's the thing when I see when I watch DeAndre Ayton, I don't see a guy that loves basketball. And I would rather have a guy like Marcus Smart who loves the city, loves the game of basketball, is going to bust his butt every single time he's on the court, and bet on Rob Williams finally getting healthy at the good contract that he has, then take a flyer on DeAndre Ayton. I think if Ayton showed a little bit more in the playoffs, at least one game where he showed up and did anything, then maybe I could talk myself into it. But Ayton's a guy that I'm out on. So I would veto this deal if I was in the front office. How about you, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I think, with DeAndre Ayton, the thing that you have to look at is one of the reasons the Suns want to trade him is all these CBA implications that we've talked about with Jaylen Brown. So, because they have Kevin Durant Devin Booker, Chris Paul will start to come off the books, but they're going to have a trouble building around that roster. So if we're worried about giving the supermax to Jaylen and then adding 30 plus million of cap space to DeAndre Ayton, you better be damn sure that those three are the three that you believe in to get it done. Because right now, even with Jaylen and Jason, it's going to be tight. And so, I think it's worth sniffing around to see what the DeAndre Ayton price was, or is, I should say. I think that this is, DeAndre Ayton still definitely needs a change of scenery. You talked about that, Adam. He's a 100% stereotypical change of scenery guy. He's talented. Greg, you talked about, how much does he love basketball? That's always kind of hard to tell, but you do kind of see it when you watch him, but we've also seen the opposite, right? We've seen him against the Bucks in the finals a couple of years ago, where it was like, hey, this guy's at least, putting up a fight against Giannis. Like, there's not many guys that you can look at and say, and now I'm saying this, and I'm sure somebody's going to put in the chat, man, he dropped a 50 burger on him in game 6. Yeah, I know. I get that. Giannis is amazing. But the point being, that's another body that you're going to have to deal with you're going to have to deal with Giannis. You're going to have to deal with Embiid. And then Ayton is going to be a more reliable availability-wise guy than Rob Williams, and obviously certainly younger than Al Horford. So it gives you a little bit of more long-term flexibility, but I do think that I would have to say no on this, but it's something worth sniffing around. A name that I want to get a thought on from you guys here. We got about 5 or so minutes left here. So as we're going through, if you're in the chat, start putting in some trades that you want to see. I know most of you have asked to remove us from the screen, have said that some of our trades are trash. So I would like to see some of the deals that we got here. But I know there's two that keep coming up. So let's start with just in general, Karl Anthony Towns. Adam, I'll start with you here. And I have one here from 60 Driver, screen name Smart and Horford for Cat. I don't think that's enough to get it done, but just in general, give me your thoughts on a trade for Karl Anthony Towns, who is a name that seems to potentially be available.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of people in the chat saying like Ayton disappears in the playoffs and Ayton's soft and stuff, and I don't see how there's much difference between what Ayton's done in the postseason and what Cat's done in his limited postseason appearances. You're definitely going to get some perimeter actions. You can run 5 out more easily. You can use him as like an offensive hub where you can initiate handoff actions around the elbows and stuff. But that's not really how Joe likes to play anyway. They have two of the best passing bigs in the NBA right now. They barely utilize them. So I think that Cat he'd fit in terms of a pick and pop guy. He'd give you a little bit of a rim threat. And yeah, maybe long term he could develop into someone that would be a good Horford replacement, but given what you'd have to give up for him and what he earns, and I'm not 100% sure that I'd be okay with that. Now, if they'd made the deal, I'd get straight behind it because, you have to, but it's not one that I'd be going out there looking for. I mean, everybody just killed my 2 trade ideas, so clearly it is what it is, but I don't mind because I kill everybody else's trade ideas. This is the way it works.
Yeah, and that's the thing with trades, man. Like, if you don't come up with it, it's the dumbest trade ever. Like, that's just the way trades work. And that's why it's fun. That's why it's fun to have these conversations. In terms of Cat, for those of you that are saying we could get Cat without giving up Jaylen Brown, that's not possible. If you want Cat on the Celtics, I think you have to give up Jaylen Brown. So if you're advocating for Cat, that means you're also advocating for JB to be gone. And if seemingly from the chat, most people don't want JB gone. One thing, Will, that I just wanted to throw out there, I saw somebody post it, and this is something that I floated to you guys just as a hypothetical as you're getting into the offseason. You're talking about the craziest, wildest ideas that are out there. I saw somebody put JB for Ja in the chat, right? Now, just as a thought exercise, what are your initial reactions when you hear JB for Ja?
That's a no for me, dog. That's my first thought on that. And it's, you asked me this a couple of days ago, and it was probably no, just because I'm not sure that I can trust Ja Morant after the last couple of months. And then hearing Adam Silver's press conference before game 1 of the NBA Finals last night, where basically he said without saying, we're going to bring the hammer down on Ja Morant, but it's going to be so heavy that I don't want it to distract from the finals. So I'll announce it after the finals ends. That's not the business I'm trying to get into. If I'm getting out of the Jaylen Brown business, I ain't getting into the Ja Morant business.
I'm out on Ja. I'm reading the chat as we go through here. I'm completely out on Ja. I think that the talent's there. The upside's definitely there. As we said in our group chat before, you're always concerned that is his game too heavily predicated on athleticism? What happens if there's God forbid, an injury, or as he ages and that athleticism starts to disappear a little bit, what type of player are you left with? Adding the off-court issues, adding however long the suspension's going to be, I'm out. That's a no from me.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
Real quick,
I agree.
Last one we'll talk about here before we get, just because this is it's come up a bunch in the chat and I've seen it online a bunch. Real quick, Greg, first you, then Adam. Give me your thoughts on any of the Portland scenarios, meaning trading likely Jaylen Brown for Dame Lillard, or the other scenario that's been thrown out there a bunch, the number 3 pick Simons and maybe Shaedon Sharpe or something along those lines. Give me your thoughts on those, because that's another one that's come up a bunch of times in the chat right now.
Okay, so here's my thing. If you're killing Adam for suggesting trading JB for Franz Wagner, and you're advocating for Simons in the 3rd pick, I think we just disagree about what value is, because Franz Wagner and Wendell Carter Jr. coming back is a much better value than getting Anthony Simons in the 3rd pick. In my opinion, you might disagree with me, and that's fine, but that's just how I feel. I think Wagner has shown a lot. He's 6'10", can do a lot of things. Simons is, he's good. He's a good player, but I don't think that's worth giving up Jaylen Brown for. The Dame thing is something where when I hear Dame, I'm like, oh, he's 33 years old. He's going to be making $60 million a year. And at the end of the day, I always end up at, yeah, but it's Dame Lillard and he's freaking good. And he's definitely one of the top 10 offensive players in the game. And he's a leader. He's going to solve a lot of issues about who has the ball, who can initiate off a pick and roll. The geometry of the court is going to change because Dame Lillard is on. So even though I'm just hesitant to go into the mid-30s point guard route, at the end of the day, it's Dame Lillard. And if we ended up making that trade, JB for Dame, I think I initially would be really sad, but I could talk myself into that trade very, very quickly because it's Dame freaking Lillard.
Yeah, I think for me, the Dame one, you're still tying 70% of your cap up in 2 guys. 70% of your cap space just completely taken away in Tatum and Dame. You're banking on Dame staying healthy for the remainder of that contract. You're banking on him and Tatum being more of a dynamic duo than what Jaylen and Tatum are. You're sacrificing some long-term upside in Jaylen's development in return to still be hamstrung by the second tax apron, to still lose your exceptions once that new CBA comes through. That to me doesn't make sense. Right? If you're moving on from Jaylen, you're doing it specifically for tax reasons, so you can continue to build out your roster year after year, not to just bring in a different star and hope that fixes things. So I'd say no to that. Simmons and the 3rd pick, again, if you don't like the Franz trade, fine, that's cool, but that's better than what you're getting back from Simmons and the 3rd pick. Franz still has a bunch of upside. He was one of the better young guys in the Eastern Conference this season. Simmons is cool and he's going to give you something, but he doesn't really fill a position of need. I'm out on both of those, to be fair, but if I had to choose one, I would probably go to Simmons and 3rd pick just because of the cap flexibility it gives you moving down the line.
Yeah, my final thoughts on this. I'm out on both. Extremely out on the number 3 pick in Simon's deal. I just don't see that making a ton of sense for where the Celtics are at. The Dame one, much like you said, Greg, I can talk myself into it, but then at the end of the day, Adam, I kind of come back to your point where if we're going to pay $110 million for 2 guys, JB is going to be 30, 31 at the time we're paying that. Dame Lillard is going to be 37, 38. So if we're going to have a 2-year window, and if we're going to look beyond that, I'd rather do that with a guy that's going to be 27, 28 getting the Supermax versus Dame Lillard, who's going to be 37, 38 by the time we get to the end of that. So that would ultimately be the route that I go. But fellas, this was a really, really fun conversation. We enjoyed it. I hope the chat enjoyed it. At least some of you in the chat. I hope that you enjoyed it. We really do appreciate y'all jumping in here, giving us your thoughts on the trades that we have. Once again, we are Green with MB Podcast, part of the Blue Wire Network. You can catch us across anywhere that you stream your podcast from, as well as you can follow us on our handles that you see on the screen right now on social media. And you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, at Green MB Pod. We do also post most of our podcasts to YouTube as well. So make sure that you guys follow along. We appreciate Bleacher Report for having us on again. And fellas, enjoy your weekend here. And we got a lot more off season to talk about the rest of the Celtics topics that we need to get into.